In this lesson, we're going to be discussing the Five9 VCC connection. The VCC connection inside of WFA can be used for a lot of different things. Primary things that I've seen it used for is be able to make changes to the environment. So there's a lot of actions associated with it, with the attached user, as well as being able to monitor the various states that agents and campaigns and skills and other things are in, and also be able to run Five9 reports with it as well. So let's go ahead and dive in. I do have a VCC connection already set up in here, but we'll sort of walk through what it would take to build one out. So the first thing you're going to want to do is actually not even in WFA. You're going to need a user to attach this to. So inside of your VCC connection, you should designate a user specifically for this because you don't want any other users using this one because when you log into things, because it uses the APIs to make all these calls and monitor these states and things. So you're going to want to make sure that it has its own login so that there's no chance that any other person may log in as this or use these credentials as it could have bad effects on the WFA connection. So you see in here, I do have a WFA one in here that's being used. And just an FYI, if you ever need to know who is connected to it, so if you have a customer or something that already has a connection and you need to reset the password or something, you can go in and say reconnect, and it will bring up this page, and then you'll see in there, it'll show you the username that's in there. So we'll go in here, and if you add a new user, I mean, best practice is just to give them everything. So, just give them all the roles. Biggest thing is going to be being able to execute the web API. So you're going to make sure it has the permissions to do a lot of these things, but the big one it's going to need is the web API. So I would just go through and check all of these. I wouldn't give the password out to anyone, obviously, for security reasons, but just give them everything as far as reporting, all the different roles. It won't necessarily need agent, but it's not hurting anything to have it. And admin, just make sure that it can use admin services because those are the big things. Everything's going to be API calls with this connection. So obviously it needs to have permissions to access the information and run these calls, but or you're going to run into problems like it won't be able to perform certain functionality if it can't reach these APIs and it doesn't have permissions to do those things. So go ahead and create that. And then once you're good there, you'd come in, say plus in the bottom right and select Five9 VCC. That's going to pop a window up for authorization. The domain name can be whatever you want it to be. Obviously, you'd want it to probably be the domain name that you're connecting to, but it doesn't have to be. Big thing is just going to be username and password, and then the region that's applicable to that. So once you do that, you hit connect, you're going to see it pop up in here just like you see this one here. So it's going to be offline for a little while it accumulates all the data and things it's trying to reach out to. And you need to give that about 5 to 10 minutes. After 5 to 10 minutes, if for some reason it's not starting up, you can go into the connection, click on this root stream here, go up to explore connections, and then go to errors. And you should see some sort of message there that might tell you why it can't connect. Like, forbidden, unauthorized is a common one I see if it doesn't have the right permissions. So just go in and make sure that you have that set up. Another, I guess I skipped over one best practice in here is when you create the user, disable the change password and must change password at the next login. You can do it. So I guess really best practice would probably be to log in as a user, answer all the questions and things like that. But if you don't necessarily want to do all that and you just want to be able to use the user right away, uncheck the user can change password and must change password at the next login. And then they'll be able to get right in versus having to answer all the security questions. So we'll go back in here and in the connections, and let's say you got online. So now we're on an even playing field here. I'm going to go into view details of this. So you're going to notice, obviously, that the top one, which is referred to as the root stream, is showing online. However, you'll see offline for all the rest of those. And where that comes in here is this setting right here, root only. So if you have that set, it comes by default as root only. It used to be the other way around, but now it's root only. And what that does, it saves you data. So if we go into here and you'll see all these different streams here. So you have agent streams, you have inbound, outbound campaigns, you have skills, things like that. It is monitoring all those, and it's going out with like the stats API to gather information about these. And then I'll go into like a user here, and you can see, it has the username, the ID, has some roles and things that it's set up, but it also at the bottom here has a bunch of different states. So agent state keeps track of certain stats, the state they're in, how long they've been in there, things like that. So it's constantly going out and getting that information and populating it, which will allow fire those um, reactions based on those particular events. So if you don't need to do any of that, then just leave it as root only, because root only will allow you to still run all the different API call actions. So if I go in here, I can still run all of these actions as far as, adding skills, changing users, all these different actions I can still do in root only. And also the events, so the webhooks that come in for the events, all that will still work in root only. The only reason that you'd want to have it set to not root only is if, say, for instance, you want to monitor an agent's states or something where, hey, they've been in after call work for 5 minutes. I want to send some sort of alert to that agent to let them know that they need to wrap up their call and be done so they can move on. Things like that. So inside of here, I'll point out a few things. This is again called the root stream. You have the root only setting. You also have the domain and SMS service client credentials in here. If you populate those with the domain ID that this is attached to, as well as the SMS service client credentials, which is the secret ID, the client ID and the secret base64 encoded value that you put in here, and that pertains to your customer or this domain's SMS API usage. So there are a few built-in SMS actions that can take place in here. So if you look, you'll see, let's find one here, send SMS tasks, and then there is set opt-in status. There's a few different SMS related actions that are built into here, but they will not work unless you have the domain ID and the client credentials for that. So before you can use those particular ones, make sure you populate that and save this data in the root stream so that you can use those. So again, over here you have all the streams, again, agents, campaigns, skills, things like that. Also want to point out you can hit plus in the lower right, and there's a couple of things that you can do here. So state change involves um, when you run a reaction for certain conditions, like I said, like after call work or something. Generally, you can only select up to like 20 agents to monitor in that way, I believe. And if you want a broader scope of that and be able to monitor like all agents and all skills and things like that, you want to use a Five9 state change. And I'm not going to go through we'll have a separate thing that talks about this, but basically you name a stream, and if you want to monitor agents, Five9 agent, and then you can put an expression in here in the state that you want to look at and the comparison, such as crosses threshold of. So if you want, if it 5 calls in queue for a skill, crosses threshold of 5, and then the value in that case would be 5. This gives you a stream that you can use that to dedicate to whatever expression you want. So if you just want to monitor 3 or 4 skills or all of them, you can put an expression here that will do that. And then Five9 report is can be heavily used as well. So you name the stream, and like I said, we'll have a separate section on using the report as well. How often the report runs, the folder and the report name in VCC reporting, and then whether you want to fire events for each row of that report, or if you want one giant CSV to come in that you can look at. And then you have your window of cumulative or rolling and then day on there. So those are a couple of things you can add there. Under the reactions tab, this lists any reaction that uses any of the streams or events from this particular connection. So this isn't all the reactions that are out there. These are just the ones that are using this particular connection. And then webhooks, you won't have any by default here. But I'll go into webhooks in a minute, but I just want to say this is where you set up those different webhooks. You don't need, depending on what you're doing, you can have one set of webhooks for that. It'll give you this URL, and then there's an action that goes at the end for an event. And also you can use the webhook helper in here as well. So we're not going to go into deep here, but I want to just show the various things that you can see here for the VCC connection. So you have event and Five9 VCC, and then you see all these events. So anyone who's familiar with looking at VCC connectors, these particular events should look familiar. Call accepted, call disposition, chat accepted, etc. in here. Those are all from the connectors. So understand that in the VCC connection, these events don't just trigger on their own. They're not set up out of the box. The user needs to come in here and grab this, and we'll go back to the webhooks in a second to show you how you make that connection. But all of these events need to be set up. You need to tell this connection that those events happened. So that can be called from a VCC connector. You get a webhook that you can use for that. And then also you can call those from anywhere. So, if you have some other application that you want to use, you can use that for this too. You just need to have the webhook and the fields that are associated to it. So let's just say call disposition comes in. So we set that up, call disposition, and then we can do some sort of action. So let's look at this Five9 VCC, and there you can see all the different actions that are available to us. So remove from skill, schedule call, update contact. So let's say update contact. Fill that out. These are all optional keys. We'll say number one's the key and data. And we'll reference left curly brace number for this. And also we'll say last disposition. If we have a contact field called last disposition, we can put the disposition name in there based on call disposition for that. So just an example of an event, an example of an action, and then also there is the option to do conditions. So we talked about states. We can talk about, let's do Five9 skill. Then let's look at calls in queue. Let's see, calls in queue. Let's do crosses threshold above 10. So that says anytime that when the stream updates and the calls in queue for the streams that I select, for this one, I just have a couple. Anytime one of these skills crosses over 10, it will trigger this reaction. I'll tell this reaction to run. Let's see. Yeah. So anytime that crosses 10, it's going to trigger this. So there's an event and a condition for that. So, fairly straightforward stuff there. I think the biggest thing is just understanding, how the streams work, how the root stream works. Biggest thing that you need to understand from this is the webhooks probably, because that's where you're going to need to do some setup. And we'll go in here and we'll go back to the webhooks. So you create this, you would say just grab the root stream, and you can just grab all of these and then name it. And then that will come up and you turn it on. And what you need to see here is two things. You can use the webhook helper to, just call these actions if you want to see what they do. Understand that you are really calling those actions. So if like deleted a user, that's really deleting the user from VCC. So just understand that part of it. You can manually trigger these events through here. So if I wanted to just simulate a call disposition one, I can enter this information that's in here to make the event go. And then states, if I want to update a state for anything, I can do that here as well. Most of the time, the webhook helper is used for like actions. Anyway, we go over here, and if we go into events, this is where you need to look at this. So you can choose form encoding is going to be more for the connectors, but depending on how you want to look at things, I'll tell you the biggest things you need to grab from this. So if you go in here and you want to do call dispositioned for an event in VCC, the biggest things you need in here are the URL. So I'd go in and I'd grab this, and I go in here and add a connector. Just call it test for now. I would do a post to that URL. Okay, you can see the call disposition event on there. And the other thing you need to look at here is the data. So there's quite a bit more than what you can see here. But you can see the thing you need to get from it is these different fields. So you see DNIS, first agent, last disposition, street, and that. So you'd go in here, let's just look at like last disposition. We can add a field, called last disposition. So maybe that's a bad field to select. Let's go to DNIS is in here. So just grab DNIS and apply that, and then attach this to a campaign based on the trigger. So by default on disposition for all dispositions, attach that. It's going to send the DNIS on every disposition call under that campaign. So that's the one-to-one and how you send that data into this. We'll have a separate section on this, but I just wanted to kind of give a quick overview on how that works. So you need that one-to-one connection and send events into the VCC connection. But really, that's it for setting this up and getting going, and then we'll have separate sections on the other various aspects of this.